Ladies, let me tell you something. The woman who knows her worth moves differently. She doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't beg, she chooses. She doesn't settle, she ascends. Because the woman who knows her value doesn't negotiate with mediocrity. She walks like her prayers have already been answered. She shows up like God personally handcrafted her next chapter. And she doesn't flinch when lesser souls misunderstand her silence because her silence was never for them. See, when a woman understands her worth, her energy shifts. You can see it in her eyes. You can hear it in her voice. She stops proving herself to people who never deserved her presence in the first place. Because she knows if you have to shrink to fit into someone's life, that space was never meant for your expansion. She knows that a discount version of herself won't save a relationship, won't fix a man, won't silence her inner voice screaming, "You were made for more." So she stops playing small. The woman who knows her worth, she speaks with clarity. She loves with boundaries. She dreams without limits and walks away without fear. Because her love is not a lifeline, it's a gift. And not everyone has the hands to hold it. She no longer sits at tables where she has to bring the seat, the food, and still beg to be fed. Now, she builds her own table, and the guest list is invitation only because she's no longer impressed by status, titles, or noise. She's impressed by integrity, peace, and presence. Let me tell you something, there's a version of you who's already walking in that power, the version of you who stops explaining why you said no, the version of you who looks in the mirror and doesn't second guess the woman looking back, the version who doesn't overstay in rooms where she's only tolerated, never celebrated. That version of you, she's not arrogant. She's awakened. She's not cold. She's clear. She's not difficult. She's done. Done with apologies that don't come. Done with breadcrumb love. Done with watering deserts and calling it growth. She's the woman who understands that peace is her new standard. And if it costs her that, it costs too much. Let me remind you, you were not made to be a convenience. You were not made to be a second choice. You were not made to beg someone to recognize the value you already carry. The woman who knows her worth doesn't wait for closure. She gives it to herself. She doesn't wait for someone to finally choose her. She chooses herself every single time. She doesn't measure her beauty in someone's ability to see it. She already knows she's rare. And let me tell you something, rarity doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't knock on closed doors. It builds its own palace, brick by unapologetic brick. You want to know how to move like a woman who knows her worth. You stop trying to convince people that you're enough. You start living like you already are. You don't settle for situations that drain your spirit. You walk away even if your knees shake, even if your heart breaks, because staying would break you more. And you stop waiting to be loved right, waiting to be seen, waiting for someone to treat you the way you treat them. No, the woman who knows her worth doesn't wait. She decides she's enough. She decides she's powerful. She decides that her life will no longer be a reaction to someone else's inconsistency. And when she decides, the ground beneath her shifts. Let me tell you what happens when you move like that. Suddenly people don't have access to you the way they used to. Suddenly the phone calls you used to answer, silence. The texts you used to agonize over, unread. The places you used to go, the people you used to beg, the parts of yourself you used to hide just to keep the peace. Gone, because now you are the peace. Now you are no longer asking to be chosen. You are the chooser. And the moment you realize that, everything changes. Let them call you too much. Let them say you changed. Let them say you got cold. Because guess what? Warmth shouldn't be wasted on people who bring the storm. You have every right to become the woman who finally sees herself. The woman who reclaims her time, her voice, her value. The woman who understands that love isn't just something you give. It's something you require. Not in arrogance, in alignment. Because when a woman knows her worth, she no longer fears being alone. She fears being in the wrong company. She's no longer afraid to rebuild. She's afraid of staying stuck. She's not waiting for someone to complete her. She is the completion. And don't get it twisted. This kind of strength doesn't come from perfection. It comes from pain, from betrayal, from being overlooked, underestimated, and counted out. But she rose anyway. She turned heartbreak into healing, rejection into redirection, and silence into strategy. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't just survive, she thrives. And she doesn't just heal, she evolves. So if you've ever been told you're too emotional, too intense, too independent, too much, let me tell you something, you are exactly enough for the life God has for you. You're not too sensitive, you're spiritually in tune. You're not too independent, you've just learned the cost of depending on the wrong people. You're not too much, you're just no longer willing to be less. Because now you know your time is expensive, your energy is sacred, your love is legendary, and you don't owe anybody an explanation for choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, or self-worth over self-sacrifice. So let this be the moment you decide you're not chasing anymore. You're not settling. You're not negotiating with the bare minimum. You're walking like a woman who remembers who she is, like a woman whose presence is prayer, whose heart is royalty, and whose story isn't over. It's just beginning. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be free. So walk like your crown isn't invisible, like your words create worlds, and move like you are the answer you've been waiting for. Because the woman who knows her worth, she moves differently. Because the woman who knows her worth, she moves differently. She's not in competition with anyone, not with her sister, not with strangers on the internet, not with her past self. She's in alignment with her spirit, her calling, and her peace. She no longer needs to outshine anyone because she finally understands her shine was never dependent on a spotlight. She is the light. She doesn't compare timelines. She doesn't envy the highlights. She understands that delayed doesn't mean denied, and quiet seasons are not empty. They're sacred. She uses her stillness as strength because she's done proving, done rushing. Let me be clear. The woman who knows her worth does not just walk away from what hurts. She walks toward what heals. She chooses the hard conversations that lead to clarity. She chooses the lonely seasons that produce elevation. She chooses the higher road, not because she's weak, but because she refuses to match low vibrations. She forgives not because they deserved it, but because she deserves peace. She lets go, not because it didn't matter, but because she matters more. And in doing that, she becomes unstoppable. She becomes the woman who wakes up and doesn't dread her own reflection. The woman who no longer sees heartbreak as failure, but as fuel. The woman who knows that losing them didn't break her. It built her. She no longer over-explains. She no longer justifies her standards. Because when you know what you bring to the table, you stop entertaining people who can't even show up with a chair. She doesn't just date, she discerns. She doesn't just work, she walks in purpose. She doesn't just exist, she embodies grace, resilience, and rebirth. This kind of woman, she's not made in comfort. She's forged in the fire. She's been to hell and walked out with wisdom. She's been ignored, used, gaslighted, manipulated, and still chose love, still chose herself, still rose. But now she rises with discernment because she knows not every hand is a hand to hold. Not every apology is change. Not every compliment is respect. Not every relationship is love. She's not bitter, she's better. Not because she hardened her heart, but because she opened her eyes. And with those open eyes, she stopped calling chaos chemistry. She stopped calling red flags passion. She stopped calling potential a promise. She honors her own needs now. She prioritizes her peace. She speaks her truth even if her voice trembles. Because she understands silence may protect protect comfort, but truth protects freedom. And this woman, she was born to be free, not caged in people's expectations, not buried under emotional debt, not imprisoned in patterns that repeat pain. She's rewriting the story. And let me tell you, when a woman rewrites her story, the world shakes because her love is no longer up for negotiation. Her boundaries are no longer optional, and her future is no longer dependent on someone else's validation. She's not waiting for a seat at their table. She's building an empire. She's not hoping they see her worth. She's investing in her own vision. She's not scared of starting over because every time she does, she rises stronger. And when she walks now, she doesn't walk fast. She walks firm. She doesn't walk loud. She walks clear. She doesn't walk for attention. She walks in intention because the woman who knows her worth doesn't need noise. Her presence speaks before she even opens her mouth. She's the one who lights up rooms just by being in alignment. She's the one who raises standards simply by existing. She's the one whose absence teaches lessons her words never needed to say. So if you've ever doubted your worth, if you've ever stayed too long, if you've ever watered someone who left you dry, let this be your awakening. You are not hard to love. You were just loving people who didn't know how to hold what is rare. You are not broken. You are just breaking out of patterns that were never yours to carry. You are not behind. You are being positioned for something greater. And when you truly know your worth, you don't just attract better, you become better. You start saying no without guilt. You start saying yes to yourself. You start dreaming again, not just little dreams, but big, scary, world-shifting dreams. Because you were never meant to live half. You were never meant to dim to make others comfortable. You were never meant to survive in rooms you were born to lead. You were meant to rise, to shine, to walk in divine boldness. Because when a woman knows her worth, she doesn't just move differently. She changes everything she touches. She becomes the woman who doesn't just demand respect. She embodies it, not with aggression, but with presence, not with volume, but with certainty. She walks into a room and doesn't wonder if she belongs. She decides she does, and that's enough. She's the one who learned the hard way that peace isn't found in a relationship, a salary, or a status. It's found in the way she protects her heart, her energy, her soul. She doesn't tolerate confusion disguised as effort. She doesn't make excuses for patterns that poison her potential. Now, she sees through the charming words, the surface gestures, the empty promises, because she knows consistency isn't found in grand displays. It's found in the little choices, the small acts that speak of care, even when no one's watching. And she's done mistaking connection for compatibility. She knows just because someone wants her doesn't mean they're right for her. Just because someone stayed doesn't mean they grew. And just because it lasted doesn't mean it was healthy. She's done idolizing struggle, done equating suffering with strength, done proving herself through pain. She's learned that real love doesn't hurt right. Real love heals. Now she chooses slow. She watches how people show up when they have nothing to gain. She watches how they speak about others, how they treat themselves, how they navigate their own storms, because how they move in silence tells her everything. And when she chooses, it's not from desperation, it's from fullness. Because she no longer seeks to be completed, she's whole on her own. Her love now comes from overflow, not emptiness. Her time is earned, not assumed. Her boundaries are honored, not debated. She doesn't play games to keep someone's interest. She is the prize, not because someone told her so, but because she remembered. She remembered what it felt like to beg for breadcrumbs, and now she bakes her own bread. She remembered what it felt like to silence her truth, and now her truth is non-negotiable. She remembered what it felt like to make herself small for someone else's comfort, and now she stands tall, even if it makes others uncomfortable. She no longer entertains what doesn't edify her. She doesn't pour into spaces where her spirit is drained. She doesn't participate in cycles that cost her more than they give. Not because she's bitter, but because she's better aligned. You see, when a woman knows her worth, she reclaims her time like it's gold. She guards her joy like it's treasure. She speaks her needs like they matter, because they do. She no longer waits for someone to treat her well. She lives like she deserves it already, and that energy shifts everything. You can feel it when she walks in, that settled strength, that untouchable grace, that refusal to beg for the bare minimum, because now she knows anything that costs her dignity is too expensive. Anything that disturbs her peace is too loud. Anything that dulls her light is too dark. And what's beautiful, she doesn't wish harm on those who mishandled her. She simply releases them with gratitude, because their absence became her awakening. She knows that elevation often comes with isolation, that not everyone can follow where she's going, that not everyone who clapped was clapping for her, but she keeps rising anyway, because her validation doesn't come from the crowd. It comes from her creator, from the quiet knowing deep within that says you were never meant to be ordinary. So she stops explaining her growth to people committed to misunderstanding her. She stops inviting people to see her value when they've proven blind to it. She stops asking for permission to evolve. Her evolution is not up for debate, and when life hits her with loss, betrayal, disappointment, she doesn't collapse like she used to. She grieves, yes, but then she builds, she mourns, yes, but then she moves, because she's realized every breakdown taught her how to rebuild smarter. Every heartbreak showed her what love is not. Every ending was disguised as redirection. She no longer fears the fall. She trusts her will, no longer fears rejection. She honors her own acceptance, no longer fears solitude. She's made peace with her own company. She's the kind of woman who finds purpose in the pain, who writes wisdom into every wound, who transforms shame into power and scars into symbols of survival. She doesn't need revenge. Her glow up is loud enough. She doesn't need to clap back. Her peace is proof. She doesn't need to prove anything. Her existence, fully owned, is the statement. And when people ask how she became so strong, so calm, so certain, she smiled, because they weren't there when she cried alone. They didn't hear the lies she had to unlearn. They didn't see her choose herself on days when even she doubted her worth. But now she's here, living, rising, unapologetically. She doesn't try to be the woman everyone likes. She becomes the woman she can respect. And that is the deepest form of power. She's not waiting for someone to rescue her. She's already doing the saving, not just for herself, but for every version of her who didn't know she was allowed to want more. For every woman watching, wondering if it's too late. For every soul that's been told to tone it down, dim it out, or disappear quietly. To them she says no more. You are not meant to disappear. You are meant to expand. And expansion means shedding. Shedding the masks. Shedding the guilt. Shedding the lie that you are somehow too much or not enough. Because the woman who knows her worth, she knows the storms tried to break her, but they built her backbone. She knows the silence taught her more than the noise ever could. She knows her time, her love, her presence. They are not free samples, they are legacy. And that legacy starts now, not when others approve, not when it's convenient, but the moment she finally decides, I am done shrinking. I am done apologizing. I am done forgetting who I am. Because the woman who knows her worth, she doesn't just walk differently, she lives differently. She lives differently because she finally stopped asking the world for permission. She doesn't explain why she cut off that friend, left that job, ended that relationship. She doesn't feel guilty for choosing silence over small talk, distance over dysfunction, solitude over superficial connection, because she's learned that protecting her peace isn't selfish, it's sacred. And now she no longer bends to fit into expectations that were never designed for her destiny. She walks in alignment, not obligation. She honors her truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it makes others uneasy. That's because her identity is no longer shaped by external approval. It's rooted in internal clarity. She's not afraid to start again, not afraid to be misunderstood, not afraid to stand alone if that's what it takes to stand in truth. Because this woman has walked through fire and didn't let the flames consume her. She walked through rejection and came out refined. She walked through betrayal and came out bold. She's no longer controlled by the fear of what if they leave. What if they don't like me? What if I fail? No, now she asks, what if I thrive? What if I stop waiting to be chosen and choose myself instead? What if I rise so high that everything that once tried to break me has to watch me bloom from below? Below, that shift in mindset, it's not arrogance. Healing from years of thinking love had to hurt. Healing from decades of measuring her worth by how well she performed, how quiet she stayed, how much she gave. She doesn't perform anymore. She doesn't audition. She belongs wherever she walks, however she speaks, because she no longer tries to be perfect. She just shows up as real. She stopped shrinking when she realized the right people won't be threatened by her light. They'll be drawn to it. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase closure. She creates it. She doesn't wait to be appreciated. She starts living in appreciation of herself, of her strength, of her growth, of how far she's come, even when no one clapped. And when she reflects, it's not from regret, it's from revelation. Because every time she got knocked down, every tear she cried in silence, every night she questioned her enoughness, they taught her something. They taught her that love without respect is manipulation, that proximity without presence is emptiness, that loyalty to others should never come at the cost of betraying herself. And now she's loyal, not to history, not to obligation, but to alignment. She's loyal to her purpose, loyal to her healing, loyal to her standards, even if it means walking alone for a season. Because she understands not all empty spaces need to be filled. Some need to be protected. She doesn't just clean her home, she cleans her energy. She doesn't just declutter her closet, she declutters her soul. And she doesn't just look good on the outside, she feels good within. Because the glow up isn't always aesthetic. Sometimes it's invisible. It's in the way she no longer explains herself. It's in the way her silence speaks louder than her need to be understood. It's in the way her peace is no longer up for discussion. She doesn't gossip, she guards. She doesn't seek revenge, she reinvents. She doesn't force connections, she flows. Because when you know your worth, your entire frequency changes. Low energy conversations don't excite you. Half-effort relationships don't move you. Unbalanced exchanges don't drain you because you don't allow them access anymore. You don't wait for someone to water you. You've learned how to be your own rain. You've become your own muse, your own protector, your own source of accountability. And because of that, your standards are not too high. Your energy is not too intense. Your vision is not too big. They were just speaking from the limitations of their own mindset, not the truth of your potential. And when you realize that, you stopped explaining, you stopped performing, you stopped seeking what you already carry, because you are the love, you are the peace, you are the light. The woman who knows her worth doesn't break herself to keep others whole. She lets what falls fall, she lets what ends end, she lets what's out of alignment exit without resistance. Because now she understands that release is not rejection, it's redirection. She doesn't fear transitions anymore because every chapter she closed made room for a version of her she hadn't even met yet. And this version, she's not chasing potential, she's building legacy. She's not proving her value, she's living in it. And she's not walking away in bitterness, she's walking in clarity. Clarity about who she is, clarity about what she deserves, clarity about where she's going. So the next time they ask, why'd you leave? Don't explain. Let your peace do the talking. Let your glow up be the answer. Let your silence remind them they should have moved differently when they had access to you. And if they say you've changed, smile, because you have. And that was always the goal. You didn't go through all of that pain to stay the same. You didn't survive all of those storms to shrink back. You didn't fight your way back to life just to hand it over to someone who doesn't know what to do with a heart like yours. You did the work. You faced yourself. You broke the cycle, you rewrote the story. So own it. Own your brilliance. Own your fire. Own your healing. The messy, raw, radiant journey that brought you here. Because now you don't just know your worth, you live like it. You breathe like it. You move like it. It has no choice when a woman no longer waits to be noticed. She becomes the storm, the calm, the revolution, not because she wanted to prove anything, but because she finally understood her presence is the proof. She doesn't knock on doors that weren't built for her. She builds her own with her own blueprint, with lessons carved in pain and bricks made from self-belief. You see, the woman who knows her worth doesn't just carry confidence, she carries conviction. She doesn't wonder if she's too much. She wonders if the room is too small. She doesn't ask, why me anymore? She says, why not me? Why not rise? Why not thrive? Why not build something that will outlive the people who doubted her? She understands now the life she's building isn't for everyone to understand, it's for her to experience. So she stops broadcasting her growth to ears not meant to hear it. She stops inviting people into a healing they never asked for. She stops pouring into cups that were never designed to hold her water. Because when you walk in self-worth, you realize that access is a privilege, not a guarantee. You learn that not everyone deserves the softest parts of you. Not everyone should be allowed to witness your vulnerability, your vision, your victory. And that's not pettiness, that's protection. She protects her goals like a sacred promise. She protects her mornings like a ritual. She protects her boundaries like a fortress because she knows what it cost her to finally feel whole. She remembers what it was like to constantly second guess, to replay conversations in her head, wondering if she asked for too much, to lose sleep over people who never lost a minute over her. But that version of her, she holds space for her. She doesn't return to her because this woman has learned that growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the quiet act of no longer responding, not responding to drama, not responding to chaos, not responding to triggers that used to define her reactions. Now she pauses, she processes, she pivots, and in doing that, she becomes more than healed. She becomes whole, and wholeness, it doesn't settle. Wholeness walks into meetings with poise. It speaks with intention. It says no with grace and yes with discernment. This woman, she doesn't hustle for attention. She operates in alignment, and alignment always finds what it's meant to find. She doesn't fear losing people anymore because anyone who leaves when you step into your power was never aligned with your purpose. She lets them go without the drama, without the desperate call, without the need to be understood. She lets them go with peace because peace is the currency she now lives by. And when people try to test her new energy, to pull her back into the old version of herself, she no longer reacts, she observes, she protects, she exits. Because a woman who knows her worth doesn't fight for a seat at tables she could build herself. She doesn't waste time trying to fix what she didn't break. She doesn't carry guilt for growing. She doesn't slow down to make others comfortable. Instead, she uses that time to invest in her dreams, in her spirit, in the woman she's becoming. She reads more, she prays more, she creates space for stillness so she can hear what life has been trying to whisper all along. You were always meant for more than tolerating lukewarm love, more than waiting to be invited into your own life, more than being everyone's safety net while no one showed up for you. You show up for you. You validate your own heart. You cheer for yourself when no one else claps. You choose yourself boldly, daily, fiercely, and that choice, it starts a chain reaction. Suddenly, you start walking differently. You stop explaining your joy. You start dreaming bigger. You stop just surviving. You start creating. You create opportunities. You create peace. You create standards so high they become a filter for everything and everyone in your life. And no, not everyone will meet them, but that's the point. You didn't come this far to settle. You didn't build this version of yourself just to invite in what your older self would have begged for. You've outgrown what no longer aligns. You've risen past what once held you hostage. You've healed from what tried to destroy your softness, but you stayed soft anyway. You stayed kind. You stayed open, not naive, but powerful in your vulnerability. And that softness, that heart, It's your superpower. Because in a world that wants women to be quiet, agreeable, digestible, you chose to be whole, expressive, undeniable. You chose to walk like you know where you're going, even if the path is still revealing itself. You chose to stop asking, am I enough? And instead ask, is this enough for me? You stopped waiting for someone to see you because now you see. And let me tell you, that's everything. You're no longer just existing, you're becoming. Not the version they expect, not the version they tried to limit, but the version that was always buried under the noise. And now that she's free, she's never going back, because she knows now worth is not proven, it is remembered, it is lived, it is felt in the way she walks into her own life and takes ownership of every moment, the way she protects her space, the way she pours into herself, the way she knows in her bones, in her spirit, in her soul, that she doesn't need to do anything extraordinary to be extraordinary. She just needs to be, and being herself, that is the revolution. So to every woman listening right now, if you've ever doubted your value, if you've ever stayed when you knew you should have walked, if you've ever tolerated less, hoping it would become more, let this be your moment, the moment you remember who you are, the moment you stop chasing, explaining, shrinking, the moment you rise, not with noise, but with knowing, because you are powerful, you are worthy, you are the answer you've been praying for. And the woman who knows that, the woman who truly, deeply, unapologetically knows her worth, she moves differently.